I knew something was wrong the moment I logged into StrataView's internal compliance portal. The report I'd filed last month meticulously compiled, time-stamped. Encrypted was gone. The title, the ID number. Even the access logs had been scrubbed, like it had never existed. It hadn't been dramatic, just a simple internal memo marked Priority High, Subject AI Rollout, Potential FCPA Violations and Ethics Risks. I had flagged 2 procurement funnels and a research subcontractor that didn't pass due diligence. Nothing speculative, hard data, signed receipts, and timeline inconsistencies that screamed internal fraud. I submitted the file, then I waited. No one responded. 3 days later, I gently followed up. HR looped me into a thread with IT, who looped me back to HR. After a week, I escalated it to Dalton's office. Still nothing. Then the file vanished. When I asked about it again, HR called me into a side room. "Celeste," the manager whispered, "we've checked. There's no record of any such report." She didn't make eye contact when she said it. I didn't argue. I just nodded, thanked her, and walked out. That was when I knew this wasn't incompetence. It was intent. StrataView used to be a company that ran on principle. Back when Michael Vance, our co-founder, still sat in the boardroom, legal had teeth. We were cautious because we knew what one misstep could cost. But now the company was moving too fast for brakes. Dalton Reeves, our shiny new CEO, was everything a headline could love. 29 Ivy League, patent-holding, startup background. None of that mattered to me. What mattered was that he wanted to take StrataView public within the year and cut every corner to get there. He called it speed. I called it exposure. But Dalton didn't like dissent, especially from a woman in her 40s with a perfect record and a history of saying no. I could feel the shift coming before it arrived. My team grew quieter in meetings. Contracts were being sent out without final review. My name started disappearing from briefings. I wasn't being ignored. I was being removed. And a week later, he made it official. When Dalton's assistant emailed me for a quick one-on-one that morning, I already knew. No subject line, no context, just a 9:00 a.m. slot and the kind of sterile formality that never preceded good news. His office on the 45th floor overlooked the river. The view was always the power move, make people look down while you talk down to them. I walked in with my head high, not because I felt brave, but because I refused to let that glass and steel room make me small. "Celeste," he smiled, gesturing toward a chair I didn't sit in. "I want to start by saying you've done amazing work. No one's questioning that. But your approach, it's slowing everything down. This company's evolving. Legal has to evolve with it." He leaned back like he was easing into a TED Talk. "We need lean. We need aggressive. We need people who understand risk is part of growth." Then came the line, polished, practiced. "You're holding us back," followed by the knife, tucked in velvet. "We're letting you go." That was it. No severance details, no HR rep in the room. Just Dalton in his tailored suit, speaking like a man announcing rebranding, not erasure. I didn't cry. I didn't flinch. I didn't give him the performance he wanted. I said nothing. I turned, walked to my office, closed the door. 15 years of files, photos, notebooks. It took 11 minutes to clear it all. I picked up the small brass compass from my drawer, the one Michael Vance had handed me during my 5th year, saying, "This is for people who never lose direction, even when the map is gone." I placed it in my bag, zipped it shut, and walked past the legal department without a glance back. No farewell speech, no dramatic email blast. No one knew yet, but they would, because the person they'd just fired wasn't just the senior counsel. I was the firewall, the quiet warning, the one who'd blocked 12 lawsuits they didn't even know had almost happened. And now, for the first time in years, The alarms were about to go silent. 3 days after I was let go, StrataView appointed its new head of legal, Travis March, 29, loud on LinkedIn, and apparently allergic to case law. His credentials, a sleek resume in product design, a podcast about disrupting outdated industries, and a talent for repeating whatever Dalton wanted to hear. I wasn't surprised. StrataView didn't want legal counsel. They wanted a rubber stamp in a Patagonia vest. From my sister's sunroom in Logan Square, I watched the news trickle out, internally. Travis was already streamlining contracts, meaning sending them out without review, externally. Things cracked faster. A client in Berlin posted about a delay in their licensing renewal. 2 others mentioned conflicting clauses. Then a screenshot surfaced internal emails showing Travis redlining my AI indemnity clause without any legal backup. And still, HR hadn't issued a formal statement. I told myself not to care. I had walked away. The compass stayed in my coat pocket, untouched. Then my phone buzzed. It was Amelia. She sounded like she hadn't slept. Celeste. I need to tell you something. She paused. I could hear office chatter behind her, muffled and tense. They made me sign your name. I stood up. The AI licensing contract, the one we were finalizing before, everything. They needed it out fast, and Travis said you'd already approved it. I didn't think he said it was just a formatting change. I closed my eyes. What clause? The indemnity one. The liability protection language. It's gone. 15 years of precision, shredded by a man who thought speed was a strategy. I thanked her gently, told her to save everything. Emails, versions, signatures. She whispered, "I'm sorry," and hung up. I sat back down, my hands cold despite the sun pouring in. That contract was the shield. Without it, StrataView had just handed every litigator in the country a loaded weapon. The plaintiffs wouldn't come tomorrow, but they were coming. And when they did, they'd bring numbers no PR campaign could outrun. The document came through Amelia, forwarded quietly from her personal email. Subject line blank. I opened it on my laptop and scrolled past the boilerplate until I found the section where the clause should have been. Clause 47. Indemnity. Gone. Not rewritten, not replaced, just missing. It was like someone had taken a scalpel to the heart of the deal. That clause had been crafted to shield StrataView from exactly the kind of third-party class action that came with AI misbehavior, unauthorized data pulls, biased outputs, consent violations. We'd seen them coming a year ago. That's why I built that clause airtight. And now it was gone. I reached out to a vendor I trusted, no formal email, just a quiet text, "You've heard anything about a breach?" His reply came 2 minutes later. Confirmed 3 weeks ago. Internal audit flagged it. PR sitting on it. Says legal has it handled. They thought legal had it handled. But legal was now Travis March, who didn't know the difference between liability and latency. No indemnity clause meant StrataView wasn't just vulnerable. They were already in violation of every client protection agreement they'd signed, which meant arbitration wouldn't be private. It would be public, loud, expensive. Worse, the insurance policy for the AI platform was contingent on that clause. Without it, the underwriters could walk. That meant no safety net, no cap, just open exposure. I didn't call anyone. I didn't need to. The voicemails had already started coming in. Journalists asking off-the-record questions. A former colleague checking if I had any insight into recent changes. One message from StrataView's outside counsel simply said, "Hey, Celeste, we should talk." I didn't return any of them. Instead, I pulled up my copy of the original contract, the one I had finalized 2 days before Dalton walked me out. I placed it side by side with the version Amelia had sent. 12 lines gone, $6 million of protection erased. The shape of the lawsuit was already forming, and I could hear its footsteps long before they knocked. The headline dropped before I finished my tea. 90-million lawsuit targets StrataView over breach in AI contracts, subheading missing legal protections, spark investor panic. I leaned back in the wooden chair at Clarendon's cafe, steam rising from my mug. Same corner table, same crooked lamp in the ceiling. 15 years ago, I'd sat in this very spot, listening to Michael Vance talk about building a company that did things right, even when no one's looking. I believed him. Now I was watching that company come apart over 12 deleted lines and a man who thought speed made him visionary. The article made the rounds fast, TechCrunch, Forbes, then Bloomberg. Every outlet added their spin. The consensus was clear. StrataView hadn't just made a mistake. It had ignored a warning, the kind of mistake that reeked of arrogance. Dalton released a statement within hours. We're reviewing our legal posture and working closely with partners to assess the situation. It was corporate air, words that meant nothing. Panic behind a curtain. And Travis, he went dark. LinkedIn profile gone. No posts. No comment. Amelia texted me later that evening. You should see what's happening on Slack. She forwarded a screenshot from a company thread 2 weeks prior. Travis had typed legal's just fancy paperwork anyway. It slows everything down. He'd added a laughing emoji. I stared at that line for a long time, not because it surprised me, but because it confirmed what I'd known the moment he'd walked into that office. He didn't understand the job. He didn't understand the weight of a contract, that every word we wrote was a shield, a promise, a warning. Fancy paperwork. That's what they called the files that had saved them from 12 separate lawsuits. That's what they thought of the protections that kept their IPO timeline clean, their boardroom quiet, their investors comfortable. Now, those investors were calling emergency meetings. Emails flooded in from outside counsel. A partner at Silver & Doyle, one of our old firms, left me a voicemail that simply said, "Call me. You'll want to see this." The first call came from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go. Then Dalton Work flashed across the screen. I watched it buzz until it stopped. 10 minutes later, StrataView HQ. I didn't answer that one either. By the end of the afternoon, I had 12 missed calls, 4 voicemails, and an inbox beginning to pulse with urgency. I listened to Dalton's message last. "Celeste, please, you were right. We need your help." His voice was flat, like someone trying not to choke on the words. I played it again, not out of malice, just for the symmetry. They said I was holding them back. Now they couldn't move forward without me. What followed was more strategic. Marla Tierney, chair of the board, emailed me directly. The subject line was short. Off the record. Her message was even shorter. "We understand mistakes were made. Can we meet privately?" I didn't respond right away. I opened the calendar out of habit, then closed it again. I didn't owe them my time, but I was curious enough to hear them say it out loud. So I replied, "Tomorrow. Clarendon's Cafe, 9:30. My table. Not their boardroom, not some neutral conference space. My table. Where this all began. The next morning. Marla arrived early. She wasn't wearing her usual heels. She looked like someone who hadn't slept creased blazer. No jewelry. Phone face down. "I appreciate you meeting me," she said, sitting across from me with no preamble. "This isn't an ambush. No one's ever ambushed me over ginger tea," I said, calmly. She took a breath. "I'll be brief. Dalton failed, and so did we. The board signed off on removing you. We believed him, believed in the new model. I let the silence do the rest." Then she leaned in. "We'd like you to come back, but not as counsel, as chief legal architect. Clean slate. Your conditions." It was the offer I'd expected, but not the context I had imagined. I stirred my tea slowly and asked her how much truth she was willing to tell, because I wouldn't come back to help them lie their way out. Marla didn't sugarcoat it. Dalton wasn't acting alone, she said, eyes steady but heavy. 3 board members voted to push you out. They thought you were too entrenched, too powerful. I laughed once, not bitter, just tired. Too powerful, I spent 15 years protecting them, quietly, invisibly. If I wanted power, I'd have taken it a long time ago. She didn't argue, just nodded like someone finally realizing they bet on the wrong horse. I'll fix this, I told her, but I'm not coming back to play cleanup under someone else's mess. She folded her hands. What do you want? 3 things. I said, 1. Dalton resigns. Fully. No advisory title. No soft landing. She blinked, but said nothing. 2. Full autonomy. I report directly to the board, and I don't clear strategy through PR or finance. She nodded slowly. And 3, when we win this case, when we stop the bleeding, you go public with the truth. You tell the press who deleted that clause, who replaced counsel with a puppet. You name names. She didn't flinch. Done. I studied her face. She meant it. Not because she suddenly found integrity, but because she'd finally realized that the only thing more expensive than a scandal was silence. Does the board know you're here? I asked. They will, she said. After the vote, we're forcing Dalton's resignation. Tomorrow morning. That word again. Forcing. It sat differently now. She stood to leave, but paused at the edge of the table. You were the firewall. We only saw it when the whole building caught fire. I said nothing, just reached into my coat and touched the compass, still resting quietly in the pocket. Later that night, I opened my laptop and began drafting the new containment strategy. 1 document. 4 phases. It was like slipping back into a rhythm I'd never really lost. But before I submitted anything, I opened a blank file. Subject Board Investigation. Internal Accountability Review. If I was coming back, I wasn't just building the shield. I was drawing the line in the sand. They scheduled the meeting in the executive lounge, neutral ground, beige walls, the kind of space meant to mute conflict, but nothing could flatten what was coming. Dalton arrived alone. No assistant, no script, just him. In a suit a little too crisp for a man whose empire was collapsing. He sat first. Didn't offer a handshake. I didn't expect one. Do you even want this place to survive? He asked, as if survival were still something he controlled. I looked at him and saw it clearly. He wasn't angry. He was afraid of losing face, of losing access, of being irrelevant. I wanted it to evolve. I said, you just wanted it to obey. He exhaled through his nose, eyes on the table. I pulled a folded page from my bag and slid it across to him. It was the termination letter. My termination letter. I'd circled his signature in red ink. You thought you were cleaning house, I said, but you removed the foundation. His jaw flexed. He didn't speak. Behind him, through the glass wall, the Strataview skyline reflected in perfect symmetry, its name gleaming on a building that now housed 2 federal investigators, 3 external auditors, and 1 class action suit building momentum by the hour. You turned this company into a headline, I said softly, and not the kind that impresses venture capital. Still, he said nothing. When it was clear he wouldn't defend himself, I stood. The board votes at 10. They've already counted. His eyes finally met mine. And if they don't, if I'm still here tomorrow, then you'll get to watch from inside while the walls cave in. He didn't follow me out. He didn't try to negotiate. As I stepped into the elevator, I watched him through the closing doors, small, still, and shadowed by everything he'd tried to control. Back in my apartment that night, I opened the file labeled Phase 2 and typed the first line, freeze all outstanding contracts involving Travis March. The first morning back. No one said my name. I stepped off the elevator onto the 42nd floor and walked through legal like a ghost they hadn't decided to believe in yet. Desks rustled, screens turned, but no one looked up. No welcome, no curiosity. Just quiet calculation. They didn't know if I'd come back to restore order or keep walking until everything crumbled. I sat in the same office they once emptied, the nameplate still missing, the chair still too new. But the inbox, that was full. I didn't waste time. By noon, I had rewritten Strataview's initial response to the class action, tightened the liability framing, shifted posture from defense to strategic compliance, and attached a copy of the original indemnity clause, time-stamped and notarized. By evening, I froze 2 contracts with vendors connected to the AI platform. Both had exposure history they never disclosed. That night, I submitted a 14-page fraud report to the board. Subject: falsified contract signatures, Travis March. Evidence included Slack messages, backdated PDFs, and 2 corroborating statements, one of them from Amelia. She met me outside the glass conference room the next morning, hands shaking. "I'm sorry," she said. "I should have told you sooner. You told me when it mattered." I said, "And that's the difference." I handed her an envelope. She blinked. "What's this?" "Your promotion." She opened it. "Legal operations manager. I don't reward silence." I told her, "You don't get punished for honesty on my team." Tears welled, but she held them back with the same quiet strength I remembered from her first week, back when she thought being invisible was the only way to stay safe. Later that afternoon, I walked into the legal war room. Not the old one, this was something new. Built out in one of the converted design labs, monitors everywhere, case trackers on 3 walls, NDA requests streaming in live. The old team stood when I entered. Some out of respect, some out of fear. I nodded once and sat down. If justice was going to be served, it would need structure. And this time, I would give it a face they couldn't ignore. Dalton's resignation hit the wires before noon. The board didn't bury it in legalese. They held a full town hall streamed live, transparent by design. I stood next to Marla as she took the microphone, the weight of silence finally lifting. "We made decisions that prioritize speed over safety," she said, "and we sidelined the one person who warned us before the first crack formed." I didn't speak. I didn't need to. The new org chart went live that same day. My new title sat alone in its tier, Chief Legal Architect. No dotted line, no chain of command above me. I wasn't just brought back. I was given clearance to rebuild everything I had once defended from behind the scenes. Later that afternoon, I walked back to Clarendon's cafe. Same table, same skyline. The sun caught the edge of the brass compass in my coat pocket. I ran my thumb across its ridges, thinking of Michael Vance, his steady voice, his belief in infrastructure over image. My phone buzzed. It was a short message from Michael Vance. "You reminded them what this company was supposed to be. Thank you." I didn't reply. Not because it didn't matter, but because some messages don't need answers. They just need to land. I paid my tab and stepped out into the street, traffic humming at my back. Strataview's headquarters stood across from me, tall and glassy as ever. But it felt different now, not like a monument to unchecked ambition, but like a place where consequences meant something again. As I crossed to the building, a junior associate held the door open and stammered, "Good afternoon, Miss Whitmore." I smiled and nodded, not out of pride, but out of clarity. They didn't have to remember the years I spent cleaning the floors they walked on. They just had to see who held the blueprints now. I walked into my new office, sunlight warming the desk. The compass stayed in my coat pocket, not because I needed it, but because it never failed to point where I was already going.